Have you ever wanted to know what your dog is thinking?
Water.
Now, some dog owners say they do know,
Walk.
thanks to buttons that seem to give dogs the ability to talk.
Snuffle mat.
It's like, how is this even possible?
Hey, outside.
Some dogs are saying so much that scientists have decided to study them.
Button.
Treat.
Yeah, so good. Go get it.
We need to look into this.
They've set up the largest animal communication study in history, with thousands of dogs from around the world.
What we want to see is where can we take this and how far can dogs go?
We know we can train dogs to do incredible things. But could we really teach them to speak our language?
Snuggle. You want snuggle? Come here. She knows what she's saying. She's communicating with me.
I know what dogs are capable of in terms of their linguistic ability, but I think that people read a little bit too far into things.
So what's really going on here? Are they just pushing our buttons? Or can dogs talk? Right now, on Nova.
Hello, everyone. I am Julia Court.
Hi, folks. I'm Chris Schmidt, and we're the executive producers of Nova. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening to talk about our Nova documentary, Can Dogs Talk? You just saw a clip from the beginning of the film, and we hope you'll check out the whole film, which is streaming on Nova's YouTube channel.
We are so delighted to have with us tonight two guests from the film, Dr. Federico Rossano and Christina Hunger. Christina Hunger is a speech-language pathologist and New York Times bestselling author who pioneered the talking dog movement when she taught her dog Stella to use recordable communication buttons.
And Dr. Federico Rossano is an associate professor in the Department of Cognitive Science at the University of California, San Diego. Federico studies cognition, communication, and social interaction, especially in non-human primates and dogs and cats. He's the scientific lead of the world's largest scientific study of button-pressing pets. Thank you so much, Federico and Christina, for joining us. Now, if you're watching this and you have a question for them, please go ahead and put it in the YouTube chat, and we'll ask some of your questions a little later.
But before we get into the conversation, we want to share one more short clip from the film where we meet Christina's dog, Stella. So let's play that clip.
This is Stella, an Australian cattle-dog Catahoula mix. It's late, but Stella isn't ready for bed.
Yes.
Stella appears to be talking.
You want to go to the park? It's a little late to go to the park.
This video has been sped up a little, but nothing has been edited in or out.
Do you want to go for a walk instead?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, we'll go for a walk. Let's get your leash on.
Leash on.
Stella has been taught to use word buttons.
Walk.
Her owner, Christina Hunger, can record different words on each of the buttons.
Stella.
Stella is the world's first talking dog.
It's a big claim. So what makes Christina think it's true?
Christina.
Chris, you can need to unmute, I think.
So I'm sorry. Hi, Christina. Um, so we just saw a little bit of how Stella, and she's an amazing dog, obviously, is using her buttons. But let's back up a little bit. I mean, that's a lot of buttons, and you obviously didn't start that way. But when did you start with the buttons and why? And what gave you the idea to give Stella any talking buttons at all?
Yeah, so I brought Stella home when she was an 8-week-old puppy, and I was working as a pediatric speech language pathologist at the time. And there are two parts of my job that are really important for understanding where this all came from. The first part of my job is that I was working with a lot of kids who used communication devices to talk because they had different disabilities or disorders that impacted their ability to talk with verbal speech. So when that was the case, it was my job to find another way for them to talk with a device that had icons or buttons that they could press to say a word if they couldn't say it with their verbal speech. The second half of my job was working with really little kids who were like 1 and 2 years old, who hadn't started talking yet, or who were just starting to talk. And so I had to be so extremely aware of all of the early language milestones, what happens right before kids start talking, and teaching them how to use words. So at this time when I brought Stella home, I was observing her for the first few days, and I just kept thinking, dogs understand words that we say to them. They can't say words back with verbal speech, but what if Stella had a communication device? What if she had a different way to say words? And as soon as I had the idea, I just couldn't unsee it. And I ordered a pack of recordable buttons right away to test out this whole concept and get started.
So you have some buttons there. Can you just show us a couple of them and tell us how they work?
Yeah, so they're about this big. This one is play. You can record any word into it, but when you press this, it says the word play, so Stella can push it with her paw. The first few words that I started with were extremely simple. I didn't ever think that we would get to this amount of buttons, but I first just wanted to see if Stella could use a few simple words to say requests like outside, play, water, so that no matter who she was with or what was happening, she could say what she would need and whoever was caring for her would understand. So those were the first few that I tried.
So what were you like when you first tried, what were you expecting? I mean, did Stella surprise you in any way? How quickly did she take to using the buttons?
She was really young, so she didn't start using them immediately. It took me about a month of modeling, which means using the buttons as I was talking. So let me grab the outside button.
Mm.
So for example, I had the outside button by the door, and right before going outside, every time I would verbally say outside, press outside, and kind of show her the button. But seriously, for the first 3 weeks, she didn't even look at the buttons. She didn't watch what I was doing at all. But I knew from my work with kids that sometimes it could really take a while for kids to notice their device and become interested in it. So I just kept at it, even though there really were no signs of progress. And then at about week 3, she started really watching me as I was pressing the buttons. And then she started like barking at me, standing by the buttons, swatting at them, and missing. And then after a month, she said outside for the first time and went outside and went to the bathroom.
So how long was it before you felt like something really interesting and special was going on with Stella?
So I was excited right away when she used outside for the first time. And then within the same week, she used play and water in appropriate contexts too. But that's really all that I thought was ever going to be possible. I thought she'll just learn some basic words to say requests and let me know what she needs. But what really surprised me was a couple months later, she started using these basic words in new ways that I had never taught. And that's when my speech therapy brain really kicked into gear and I started thinking about what more might be possible. The first example was her water button. So I had only ever taught it and used it when I was filling up her water dish or when she was taking a drink of water. But one day I was watering my houseplants and Stella was following me, watching what I was doing. She left the room, walked down the hall into where her buttons were, said water, And I thought, oh, she must need a drink of water. But I went over to her bowl and it was full, and she didn't take a drink of water. She just kept watching me water my plants. So that was the first time I saw her use a word in a way that I didn't teach. And also just to point something out to me, not to get something from me, like get water.
I mean, well, obviously things have progressed a lot since then. You've got a lot of buttons behind you. How many buttons are on that, Matt?
She has 48 buttons on here.
So like from one button to 48 buttons, you started posting videos online. I think you were the first person to do that. And now those buttons are, they're the centerpiece of a major study at Federico's lab. I mean, it's really amazing, which is what we cover in the film. It's something. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so Federico, you study animal communication. How did you hear about dogs like Stella and who were using these buttons, and what did you think when you first heard about it?
Well, to be honest, I got an email from a colleague that was saying, "Hey, have you seen this videos? They're online," and I believe Christina was on CNN as well, and so they were like, don't you want to study this? You study animal communication. Shouldn't we look into this? The fact was that I was very familiar with the history of the animal language studies when we tried to train great apes, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas with human language. And I knew about all the issues that were associated with that kind of research and pushbacks and the ethical concerns. And so my initial reaction was like, no, thank you. I'm happy to continue working with primates and just their spontaneous behavior. I was actually going to Congo at that time to study chimpanzees with the Jenguru Institute. And so it was just like, no, thank you. And then a few months later, I got a friend sending me the clips of another dog that was also using buttons. A dog that's quite popular is Bunny, which is also very popular on social media now. I am not on social media, so I had no idea of who this dog was. And I was like, that's great. Now there's two dogs that are doing this, still not interested. And the difference was at that time, they told me, hey, there are actually potentially a few hundred people that might be interested in sort of getting into this type of training. And at that time was the beginning of COVID. I just had my daughter, my first child. And so I was very much tuned into what it means to learn language. And I was like, okay, well, let's think about it for a second. And if we could do it where we're not bringing any dog into the lab, but rather we let the owners do the training at home and make sure that everything is excellent and ethical, and there's no particular stressor for the dogs, then we can try. And I really assumed there was going to be like maybe 40, 50 people were willing to do this. And this little project that started as a side project turned into the largest animal communication study ever done, with 10,000 participants from 47 countries.
I mean, so I have two dogs currently. I've had other dogs. Some days I really want to know what they're thinking. Some days I'm not so sure. And I got to imagine everybody with a dog would really love these buttons. And so you start this study, and so I'm guessing scientists probably are patting you on the back and saying, congratulations, Federico. This is the most important scientific research that anybody in our field has ever conducted, right? That's basically what happened, right?
That would have been very nice, yes. Unfortunately, it was quite the opposite. I mean, I was at the beginning of my career I was an assistant professor. My position was definitely not permanent. And I actually started getting text messages and phone calls saying, have you decided not to ever get tenured, which basically means have you decided not to be a professor? And people warned me against it. They were like, look, given the history of this type of research, chances are that either this is a complete fluke and you're just sort of betting on something that is a massive waste of time, or that you will be forever associated with something that might be problematic, right? And so then people then would decide that don't trust you, or you should never do this research again. And it was a serious concern. I mean, the people that reached out were people that I trust and admired, mentors and colleagues. And so I spent a lot of time together with the collaborators that we started this project with, really carefully thinking, how can we do it so that we avoid the major pitfalls of prior research? And in the documentary, we do talk about some of these concerns, right? It's like, how do you do it so that even if it doesn't show anything interesting, at least you can sort of live with it and just be like, hey, as a scientist, you start with skepticism. You try to do your best to see if there's anything, and if there's nothing, it's still worth the effort, right? You've done your best. But if there is something, then I think the world should know what there is, and we should just let it out.
Christina, how about you? As you're working with Stella and you're posting her videos online, what kind of reactions are you getting? And are you hearing both from people who are following you online, but also are you hearing from scientists too? What are you hearing in reaction to what Stella's doing?
It's been a really big mix. I mean, I can't overstate enough how unexpected this trajectory was for me. When I was teaching Stella, like, I didn't think it would ever get to this level. I decided to launch a blog and I wrote articles about what I was observing as a speech pathologist. And actually, the only reason that I had videos on social media was because I had to have videos hosted somewhere to put them on my blog. And so when the first article about my work came out, I went from having 500 followers, which was mostly just like friends and family, to 500,000 in less than 2 weeks. I mean, it completely exploded. And before that time, I had been totally off of social media, not using it personally or anything. So this was like hugely insane, this huge wave at once. And at first, I mean, it was just so much enthusiasm from the general public that I really didn't ever anticipate. I thought, you know, in my work with kids using communication devices, it was really hard a lot of times to get parents on board with that kind of device and teaching and explaining it. And so I was looking at it from that lens of like, it's hard enough to get kids devices and get people to understand this. Like, if anyone does this, it'll just be nerdy speech therapists like me who, you know, who already get it. But so many people saw the potential and wanted to teach their own dogs. And that was just really, really incredible. I think, of course, there's always going to be skepticism with a new idea, especially one that's really paradigm shifting. So there has been skepticism, but it's just also been a very enthusiastic response from the general pet community.
I mean, Federico, in a way, I kind of imagine that the hurdles you had to jump in order to be able to do this and feel like you were not ruining your career, the level of skepticism you had to bring, the level of rigor, which we've seen in the footage of the film, which is really impressive. Maybe that actually helped your research in a sense. But maybe actually you could just tell the audience a little bit about what is some of the history, like why were scientists so skeptical and troubled by taking on this research? Like, I'm just thinking of, you know, the chimp research or the primate research. Can you tell us a little bit about that so people know what you were up against?
Yeah, so there has been a kind of a long history of trying to train animals with language, with symbols and words. First, we tried to see if they could speak. We tried with chimps and we realized they couldn't. And so we tried to teach them sign language. And some of these apes were sort of trained for many, many hours a day. Some are very famous, like Coco the gorilla, Washoe, a chimpanzee. Some became famous because of documentaries, for example, like Nim Chimpsky. But part of the idea was, you know, you try to train them with sign language, and if they can learn it, then they have learned the language. And if they can communicate back and forth, that's great. The problem was, of course, that there was very poor documentation of the training, that when you would actually look at what they were learning was very much mimicking or copying what the demonstrator had trained a million times. And we all know that you can train many animals to do certain tricks if you just train them enough times. You can train a pigeon to ring a doorbell if you just do it enough times, right? So it's kind of like, so was it really showing any special intelligence, or was it just a matter of like doing it again and again? And the other issue, of course, was that what was happening to a lot of these animals is they were sort of wild animals or animals that were, in many ways perceived as, they shouldn't be in a lab, and they shouldn't be. And they were trained in the lab for many hours a day and isolated mostly from their conspecific, which also meant that they were traumatized in many ways. And so now you have research that seems to be hurting the animals, that is not necessarily done as systematically as you wish. And the finding don't seem to be worth the effort, right? So it's kind of like, why are we even doing this if we already knew that you could train a pigeon? Like, yeah, you can train a chimp. Like, why is this important? So in general, there was this movement, and what happened very, very simply was like, a famous paper came out in 1979 in Science that basically said there's nothing interesting here. And then a big conference happened where people started yelling at each other and saying, you are a fraud, you're like magicians, this is just tricks. And NIH, NSF, all the funding agencies were like, we're not going to fund this anymore. That's it. We should put a stop to it. So some people continue doing some of this work, but in a different way. For example, we train parrots because parrots, of course, are vocal learners. So we can, famous Alex the parrot. Some other try to train animals, for example, to use devices almost like keyboards, like Kanzi was a bonobo using a lexigram with several hundred buttons. And others were like, why don't we just study their spontaneous communication? So we can study how a chimp communicates with a chimp, or how a whale communicates with a whale, instead of trying to train them with language. So the moment I was asked to work on this, I was basically doing the latter. I was looking at their spontaneous communication, done a lot of work on gestural communication, and in particular in chimpanzees and bonobos and so on, mother-infant interaction. And so my initial take was like, why should we train them with these devices, and why should we get into something that 40 years ago people told us we should not be doing? There was a key difference, though. In the last 40 years, a lot of work had come out showing that while great apes don't really care so much about human communication or about what humans are interested in, dogs are amazing at learning words, and learning language, and learning vocalizations from humans. They pay special attention to our facial expressions. They are tuned into humans. Of course, they live with us. And so if anything, they understand pointing and so on. So if anything, the one species you would want to work with is the one that would be willing to learn and potentially use this to communicate with the humans. So maybe the mistake was not the research. The mistake was trying to do it with the wrong species. And we thought it was the right idea because we thought, well, great apes, chimpanzees are our closest living relatives, so we should look at that. But maybe we should think that domestication has helped us select for species that would be tuned into what we care about. And anybody who has a dog knows how incredibly tuned they are into who we are, what we care about, and what we're trying to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some questions from the audience, and I think this could be for both of you. So the question is, the documentary showed the dogs learning to press buttons that seemingly express desires like outside and want food, etc. Are there any examples of a dog learning to represent an emotional state? And Christina, do you want to does Stella do that at all?
Yeah, she has a couple simple emotion words, happy and mad, and she uses both of them very frequently. I decided to add those words after we had probably about 15 buttons at that point, and I knew that Stella had different emotions through her body language and vocalizations. You could tell when she was upset, tell when she was excited or happy. So I paired happy with when she would show me she was excited or happy about something, wagging her tail, getting excited to do something that we were going to do together. And then mad when she was visibly upset. Most of the times it was if I had to say no to something that she wanted to do. So as I was teaching Stella, I really tried to see what she was already communicating, because dogs are such excellent communicators with their natural body language and vocalizations, and then pair a word to them, which is what I would do with kids who are learning to talk too.
Federico, in the film, well, another question from the audience, and I want to add to it. So does having language abilities change the type of communication you get with your learner? Since this person asked, since they started using buttons with their cats, the cat now narrates her life, not just asking for things. And I know, Federico, you show in the film a word cloud that represents all of the buttons in the words that are pressed. And there's always this question of, how much are we projecting? How much are we trying to hope and believe that what the animal is saying is what we really want them to say? And the thing that was so impressive to me was how the patterns emerged from all these thousands and thousands and thousands of button presses. Could you kind of describe that and maybe think about how to answer that question about things that the animals may be asking or saying that are novel?
Yeah, so the beauty of it is that when you have many dogs, and just to give you an idea, we receive about now we have automated logging with apps and so on, and we get about 1 million button presses a month right now. So that's the amount of data we're dealing with, which is a lot of data. And so, of course, dogs have many different buttons. The buttons that they have and the words associated with it are chosen by the humans, which of course means that, if the human decides I'm going to teach you brisket and ribs, that's the words you have. Actually, there's a dog that has several words for different types of barbecue food from Texas is one of my favorite. And it's like, if that's important to you, that's important to you, and at the same time, of course, you could decide that you want to teach them something completely different. But what matters to us was like, if the idea is that they just push the buttons to get your attention, then there should be an equal probability of pushing any of these buttons. If it's just like producing a sound gets the human to come and look at me, that's it. What we find, though, is that when you look at it systematically, no matter sort of when you look at the buttons that they have and the likelihood of producing or pushing certain buttons rather than others, the first thing we find is that it's not matching the training they get. A lot of humans, for example, train the button "I love you" because they want the dog to push it back. And while sometimes they push it, the amount of pushing of "I love you" is way less than the amount of training they get. But the amount of training they need to learn treat or to learn outside or to learn play is way less. So they're not matching the amount of training they get with the buttons they press. Treat, outside, water, play, those are buttons that dogs press way more than other buttons, which again tells us that they are choosing what to press because those are the things they want, right? And cuddles or scritches, which is another one that they often use. And as Christina said, many of these dogs have words associated with emotions. Mad in particular is one word that a lot of these animals have to display that they're upset. To be honest, that's much easier than learning happy because it's much easier to sort of figure out when you are upset. One of the ways in which they learn happy, interestingly, is by associating it with the demonstrator, with the owner. So there's a lot of dogs, for example, that push "mom happy," which basically is like asking sort of like, "Hey, are you happy now?" or "You look happy." So kind of narrating what they're saying, which again makes sense. It's the same way in which a 2-year-old basically starts labeling, happy or not. So does having language allow you to communicate other things? Of course it does. It's important because it allows you to reveal your inner feelings in a way that, it's much harder to do apart from saying "I'm upset." Like one example I give is like, I can tell you, you can see I'm upset, but what am I upset about? Is it because I'm in pain? Is it because I'm hungry? Is it because I want to be outside and you don't let me out? Like, am I mad at you? Am I mad at, because I'm not feeling well? If I could tell you why I'm upset, then you can help me. And if I can ask you for help and tell you what bothers me, now everything changes. The same is like, of course, dogs can communicate amazingly with us. They already do. And they can scratch at the door to tell you they want to go outside. But why do they want to go outside? Is it that squirrel that they just heard or they just saw from the window? Is it because they need to go pee? Is it because they just want to go out? And so if you know why, maybe you decide to open the door or keep it closed. And I think that's also important.
I have a story on that. There was one time when Stella was whining by the door, like really persistently. And I thought that she just wanted to go back to the beach. It was when we were living in San Diego across from the beach. And I just kept saying no, because it was going to be dinner time. And she went to her buttons and said "toy inside." And I remembered that I dropped the toy that we were playing with right on right in front of the door. And so then I opened it, washed it off, and brought it in, and she played with it. But I just would have said no and not, because I assumed she probably just wants to go back out to the beach. But she told me exactly why she was whining, which was very helpful.
Federico, we've been kind of talking about the study, but haven't actually said like what it is and how it works. Can you explain how you set up this study? What is it? Who's involved in it? What is the data you are actually collecting, and what are you trying to figure out from it?
Yeah, so if anybody wants to participate, they can sign up into the study. And what they do next is they get some basic instruction about basically getting buttons and starting the training. There's different ways in which you can do it.
Is there like one kind of button that people need to get, or is there flexibility?
No, so this is very important. There's many different brands of buttons. There's very different sizes also, depending on, the size of your dog might matter which size of the button you want to use. There's different ways of placing them. Some people put it on the wall. Some people put it close to the things that are, for example, near the fridge or near the door, depending on what they're trying to communicate. Other people have kind of tiles that is organized in terms of meaning, like all agents are here, or people are here, or names of food are here, or locations are here. And what happens is that you start the training, modeling, as Christina said, and you start seeing whether they learn it or not. Now, depending on what you're doing, ideally, so we have a questionnaire for you to fill out when you start. And then if you, for example, use devices that automatically log and have and you use an app, then we can know immediately every time that button is pressed, what time of day it was, and you can tell us what was going on. So a lot of people participate that way. Basically, they let us know when they introduce a new button, when it is pressed, who's pressing it, the human, the dog, and so on. Now, the next step is a lot of people are getting now cameras. They have devices at home. They're either already filming for their own needs. Mm-hmm. Others let us put some cameras so that we can film, and then we can actually go through the videos to figure out the context in which these interactions happen, so that we can see that the button pushing was not cued by the human. The human was not like putting a treat on top of it and saying, now go push that. But it was somehow spontaneous. And then the next thing is experiments. So if you want, it is behavioral studies. It's kind of games, right? So we might send you a researcher to run some basic games and see if, when you say that your dog understands the word play, can we get confirmation that that's true, that they understand outside? Do they do it? Sometimes we do it via Zoom so that you can actually participate that way. Sometimes we do training studies where we give you instructions to sort of start training new concepts, and we have little tests to see whether they're learning them. And so you can sort of see the progress of how they're learning all these concepts. And by doing it sort of on one end in a more survey interviews way, and then the logging of all the buttons and the cameras and then the behavioral experiments, we're trying to find different ways to capture, through different methods, basically, what is going on, hoping that, we can kind of systematically find what's happening. Now, one of the things that is very important is, you should not expect for every dog out there to be like Stella. That is very important, because of course, you're like, a lot of this amazing dogs out there are amazing dogs. We know that some dogs are much better with words than others, and some people might try to train and it doesn't quite work as well or as quickly as they were hoping. Every dog can learn how to use the buttons. The question is it ultimately something that is good for you and is good for them, and do you want to do it? It's not a requirement to have.
How much is it up the dog, and how much is it the owner?
I would say it's more about the owner than about the dog. I've had several owners being like, I don't need to know when they're upset with me, or I don't need to know how many times they want treats. I think we can stop it here, and it's like, it's fair enough. I completely understand it. I have a 3-year-old who keeps asking me why for everything I say. And I'm like, if we could stop this for 1 second, it would be easier. But I'm also like, but I'm happy he's trying to ask me why of everything I say. So anyway, the idea again is like, you don't need buttons. It's not a requirement. But if you want it, if you can use it, maybe they can help you connect in a different way. And the important thing is that having buttons, the use of buttons, does not change the way in which they communicate with you in any other way. The way I think about it is like, when you learn how to read and write, you can still talk. It's not that all of a sudden you don't talk anymore or you lose your ability to talk. It's a different modality, and it's a different way of communicating. In some senses, like a second language, like you can speak to an audience that you usually could not speak to, but it's also a different modality because it's not, this barking is not the wagging of the tail. And so it's really like writing, right? Now you can find another way to communicate. It doesn't kind of change your spontaneous behavior and your way of doing things. Indeed, one of the things we're interested in is, when is it that you resort to the buttons? Most people think that these dogs use buttons 1,000 times a day. The reality is most dogs might use it 20 times a day. Kind of like I like to say, it's kind of like your teenage son that's just like, hi, I'm going to get pizza. See you later. That's a lot of this. It's not a lot of conversation. But sometimes they feel like chatting and they feel like asking for things. And that can be fun, and can make you feel connected in a way that maybe is a little different from how you feel connected before you introduce these devices.
So actually, Christina, so we have one of the attendees is throwing some shade on Shiba Inus in the question. And the question basically is, are all the breeds the same? And this person is suggesting Shiba Inus might be a little bit more difficult to get engaged. But I'm sure that the answer is like across all kinds of breeds. But I'm just curious, Christina, if for somebody who wants to kind of just start at the beginning and kind of break it down, like what are the steps? And do you think that there are differences in the aptitude of different breeds, or what makes a dog that is a great button dog, and what maybe makes a dog that you can understand isn't going to be so good at it? If even that's a question.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's specific breed differences that we can conclude yet. What I would say is personality differences to look at. Like, if your dog is already very communicative with you, they're probably going to do really well with the buttons because they're already trying to communicate a lot. Dogs who are very observant to what's going on, tuned into you. A lot of dogs who are very vocal, very communicative, take to the buttons well because, again, they're already just like bursting with communication, trying to share something. And getting started, a couple key things to keep in mind. I always recommend to start with more than one button. So I recommend doing like 4 to 6 buttons for just simple, easy to teach concepts. And the reason being, if you start with just one button and train one concept, it can be really hard for dogs to unlearn that not all buttons mean whatever concept that you started with. So like if you just start with outside and have one button and then you introduce another one, now you have to teach the differentiation, whereas you can just start by showing that each button represents a different concept. And the second reason is that you just get more exposure for your dog if you have more words to start with. So like 4 to 6 or 3 to 6 words is a great place to start because you'll be modeling it throughout the day. Your dog will be seeing it in action more than if you just picked one word. And then again, have that differentiation from the start. And then also do not reward with treats. That is the biggest thing. If you were teaching a child to talk, if they said ball, you wouldn't go get a goldfish and give it to them because you want to teach the meaning of the word. So you're responding to any button press with the meaning of the word. You're not rewarding with a treat. So you're pressing the button, saying it with your verbal speech, showing your dog that they can use it too. And then when they do, act with the meaning of the word that you were teaching.
So presumably you can give a treat if the button is
treat.
Yes, exactly. Only the food button. So,
although I mean, there's some shots in the film where it's like treat, 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 treat.
Yep.
So at some point you say no.
People get really concerned, honestly. They say, but then I have to say yes to everything. And that is not true. It's a big misconception. In the very beginning, of course, you want to respond to what your dog says so that they learn what the meaning is and what the power of the word is. But just like with kids, if they're asking for a cookie all day, you don't have to say yes every time. You can respond without saying yes. You can say, I heard you ask for a cookie. We'll have one later. We're all done cookies. Same goes with dogs. They can learn some limits.
And then that's how they learn mad.
Yep. 2 in 1 lesson.
So some people have asked about cats. How do cats
Yes.
do? Have people studied cats with and tried to use the buttons with cats?
Yes, we have 700 cats in the study, and many more, of course, are training. Cats are fascinating animals. They are incredibly intelligent, but very hard to test. They are not very patient, let's put it this way, and not super trainable. But the ones who are actually quite impressive and very similar in many ways to what the dogs are doing. The number of buttons that they have, the one that we've been training for a while, are analogous. Actually, the median is pretty much the same. So when you look at, again, the number of cats that we have, the median number of buttons for cats is 9, and for dogs, I think now is 8. So it's pretty similar. Some get to like 70, 80 buttons. We have dogs that have 100 buttons. And the cats, the one thing that I like to say is that they're a little different in terms of the words they like to say a lot. Mad is definitely a word that they like to press a lot. My favorite is in the top 5 buttons that they like to push. For a cat, there is no. And the other one is settle, telling the human to calm down, basically, which I think is also very, very cat-like. If you look at dogs, no is very far out. Yes is way before no. For the cat, it's the other way around. No comes way before yes. So we're looking into this. We actually have basically replicated a study that we published with dogs. We're now replicated with data from 152 cats. We are currently submitting it for review with like a lot of data. And we're very much interested in sort of conducting with cats the same type of studies that we have been doing with dogs, and obviously expanding. I think, as you can imagine, when the scientific field is kind of pushing back, you might want to start slow and start with the species that you have more subject from, and that maybe, we know a lot about dogs learning words and so on, and so it might seem more reasonable, which is what we did. But we're very much moving into cats right now, and if you have a cat, please do sign up.
I mean, one of the things that's most impressive in the film is the examples where you see the dogs stringing together multiple words to create a more complex idea. I'm sure cats would love to say, like, I've never been treated so shabbily, or something. But what do you have a sense of like what the limit is? What's the maximum that you think a dog or cat can reasonably put together?
It's hard to tell because part of the challenge is context, right? And the timing between the presses. So I for sure have seen multiple animals using at least 3 buttons together, equivalent to like subject, verb, object. One of my favorite example from Bunny is cat, dog, want. Cat, I want, and basically is like first telling you the object, what they're trying to get, and then who the subject is and want. Which, by the way, you've seen in the clip with Stella. They're like outside want, or like it's first saying what you want and then saying want. Which, by the way, is the same way as young children who are learning how to speak. They first tell you what they want and then they add the verb afterwards. And so it's interesting again because you see a lot of similarities. We haven't really done a study trying to see how many of these buttons that can combine. Not everybody introduces a lot of verbs. And so that's, of course, a little complicated because if I say ball, outside, food, now, I'm like, was that one sentence, or were you like bowl outside and then you switch to I want to go outside now, and those were 2 different things. And but because they were produced close to each other, we're trying to imagine a scenario where all these things come together. So that's one of our challenges. Is sort of, there's a thing that children do, which is basically using it's called holophrastic use of words, which basically I can say, if I say ball, I might refer to ball. I might also meaning I want the ball, or like give me the ball. It might mean there's a verb, there's an action attached to it. And so that's the part that becomes harder if you don't have many verbs in your vocabulary, because maybe it doesn't get trained by the owner. So personally, I'm excited about the ones who have 100 buttons because there's more range that we can explore to see what they can do.
Here's a question from the audience that I really love, or two questions. Do dogs only use the buttons when people are around? And in multi-dog families, do they use the buttons to talk to each other?
Christina first, maybe,
yeah,
and then I can add my yeah.
Stella definitely uses the buttons more when we're home. We have set up a camera and seen her use them sometimes when we're not here. And there's actually an example in the documentary. It's very heartbreaking. She's howling, looking for us, and then says where with her buttons. So that was just like shattered us. But a lot of times I'll actually be like somewhere else in the house totally, and she'll go over to use her buttons because she knows that I'll hear them still. And then sorry, the second question, remind me.
Do they, if there are multiple dogs, do they talk to each other?
Right. I have seen that. I think it's predominantly to use with the humans, but I have seen a couple examples in with families that I've worked with that have multiple dogs. And Federico, you might know that answer more.
Yeah, so they might press the buttons sometimes, especially in the beginning when they're kind of learning it. It's almost like a memory test. You just push it to sort of check what does this button sound as again, and what about this button. So you do see them pushing it sometimes. Usually it goes down over time. They tend to use it only when the humans are there. But in the beginning, you might find that they try to interact with it also when they're alone. And the second question, yes. The question is, do they press it for each other? Yes. The question is, do they do it because they're thinking they use it as a communicative tool for each other, or they do it for the human? To give you an example, there was this, we have it on video. There was this dog that was on the couch in the spot that the other dog loves and was beside the human that was watching TV. The second dog goes to the button and says, play. And so the dog on the couch just jumps out, ready to play, and the one that touches the button just jumps back on the spot and has zero desire to play. So, clearly the one who responded was the other dog.
It just wanted to get its spot on the couch.
It was like, clearly the other dog listened to it and was like, play.
Dog.
But it's like, so all I'm saying is where I've definitely seen is dogs and cats using the buttons to somehow communicate needs that then they might be understood. So the reality is they should not need to use buttons for each other. They can clearly communicate in other ways. They're a member of the same species. But if you have a dog and a cat, then yeah, that might be handy, actually. That could be helpful. And when they do it, as I said, I need to look more into, is it because they're trying to mess with the other one, or is it actually because they're trying to communicate something?
That's amazing. Let's see. We have another.
I think we have time for like maybe one more question. And
yeah, I just want to ask. Oh, here's a question, which is, I also want to know what it has for both of you. What has been the most surprising part of this journey or research that you guys have been that has struck you?
For me, I think seeing something that started with just me and Stella be replicated in so many homes and see the same things happening with a lot of dogs and what they're communicating. I think I have just been like in a constant state of surprise with all of this, just like milestone after milestone that Stella was reaching that I truly didn't ever think, would be possible initially. But I think just seeing the magnitude of how many people are doing this in their own homes, the research that's been coming out and showing that a lot of what I've been seeing with Stella is happening in so many other homes with buttons too. So that's just been really exciting and surprising in a good way.
For me, two things. One is the incredible desire of people to be involved in research and science and just trying to help, and that is amazing. Like, as we often underappreciate the fact that people want to participate, they want to know, and they want to help. It's not the case that they don't care. The second thing, which is maybe even more important, is a lot of work with dogs has focused on how dogs can learn names of objects, of toys, for example, and that's amazing, and they can learn many of them. And of course, we know they can learn commands. But one of the things that amazed me the more I look at the buttons that they press is how many times the dogs are asking about the humans or non-humans that live in the household. And so they push the name of the other dog or the name of the human that just left the house, or like, where is the other one, or call for them, which is a reminder that these are social creatures. And, you know, maybe we have one dog in the house and it's like, oh, it's just one dog. But it's like, but it's not one dog, it's you and the dog and maybe everybody else in it. So they're pack animals, they're social animals. And to sort of assume that all they care about is just learning names of objects or learning commands for actions, it's kind of missing out on the social dimension, on their need for connections and the need to sort of be appreciated as members of the family, right? It's like they are part of our family. And I think during COVID, a lot of people came to appreciate this. And I think that's why a lot of people started the training. Is like, I see you, you see me, and we have connected. And is there any way I can figure out what are you thinking right now? And if this helps us connect a little bit better with them, I'm happy.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, Stella. I'm interested, Christina, maybe afterwards, Stella will tell you what she really thinks of this conversation. She seemed maybe, I don't know if she was bored or what, but maybe there's some tail wagging going on there.
Yeah, we saw
But
I'll let you know.
Thank you. Maybe she can leave a review.
Right.
So everyone who's watching, if you have a dog at home and are interested in joining Federico's study, also Federico, if they have cats,
yes,
do they contact
if they have cats too,
Okay.
please. We need dogs and cats.
Check out the link to Federico's lab website. It's in the chat. You could sign up and participate. And thank you everyone who joined us for this live conversation.
Yeah. And if you want more dogs, so Nova's Can Dogs Talk is streaming online on the Nova YouTube channel, and on our website, pbs.org/Nova, and on the PBS app. And sign up for the Nova newsletter, please, to stay up to date with what's happening on Nova. I guess thank you all for joining us. We've had a great time sharing Christina and Dr. Rossano's story with you, and we hope you have a great night.
Good night. Bye-bye.